Hail Christ, hail victory, blessings from the kingdom of the Son of God in the beautiful San Gabriel Valley in beautiful sun-drenched California, Southern California to be exact. You know, back in the day in professional boxing, championship fights used to be 15 rounds. And then at some point, probably in the late 80s or mid 80s, it changed to 12 rounds. But I remember those 15 round fights. And that's kind of how our walk in the kingdom is. And in effect, if you in the back in the golden era of boxing, if you went 15 rounds, you went the distance, there was going to be bumps along the way. You know, you weren't going to come out unscathed. However, if you went the distance, you at least had a chance of winning by decision. And this is kind of how our walk in the kingdom of Christ is. It's a 15 round prize fight. And in that prize fight of our walk in the kingdom, we have an adversary called the devil. And the devil will come at you, right? He will come at you with body blows, headshots, rabbit punches. And 15 rounds means you have to endure. There's an endurance factor in a 15 round prize fight. This is why boxers train differently than other athletes, because a lot of it is stamina, it's endurance, it's what they call cardiovascular, right? So in the kingdom of Christ, our walk in the kingdom is a cardiovascular situation, spiritually, that is. We have to train for the long term. And a lot of people come through Christianity and they start off strong and then they fizzle out, right? They're like that rocket. It's amazing at first and it's like quick and fast, but it fizzles out like a comet. And so in our walk in the kingdom, blessings, Sister Michelle, good to see you. Hail Christ, hail victory. Good to see you. So that walk in the kingdom is one where we have to train for the long run, the long term. And that's where, you know, really digging for the treasures, both old and new, is. And a lot of people also in the kingdom, they don't put on those virtues that Peter the apostle says to put on, right? To make your calling and election sure. The virtues of brotherly kindness, love, godliness, kindness. He mentioned several in verses 5-7 in 2 Peter 1. Virtue, which is moral excellence. And one of the main things that causes people to be knocked out of the kingdom, to be knocked out or to stay down, is the lack of being diligent to put on those virtues that Peter describes. And what does Peter say? If you put these on, you'll be thus richly and have a rich entrance into the kingdom of Christ, which is now, we are now in the kingdom of Christ. And what happens to people that don't diligently strive to put on those virtues is they fall into sin, right? And Peter, the book of Hebrews says to looking unto Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith, and to put aside that weight that's so easy, laying aside every weight and setting aside the sin that so easily besets us. Now, in the Christian churches, a lot of times what I notice, and I think this is a ploy by the devil to get you to feel like you cannot overcome sin completely. You cannot overcome sin. You cannot walk a righteous life. And that's a deception by the enemy, because he knows if he can get Christians to take sin lightly, to fall into sin, and worse, even stay there, that he's got he's defeated them. right? That's how Satan defeats Christians, by getting them to accept sin, to live in sin, and to think that because of the blood of Christ cleansing them, that is enough. It's enough for our salvation, certainly, but we're still called to walk in moral virtue. And Peter even says that those who fall into sin, they have forgotten that they've been cleansed from their old sins. The cleansing of our old sins should cause us to strive against sin, as Jesus said, to strive to put on the virtues that Peter describes in 2 Peter 1, 5 through 7. And it's that training, it's just the reading your word, praying. It's not always the big things. It's the little things, the training, the denial of self and picking up your cross is key. Because this kingdom road that we're on is a long, long road. If you live your life for any amount of time as a Christian, it's a long road. It's not a quick anaerobic exercise, right? It is a long marathon race. That's how Paul describes it, right? We go for the prize. But he says we must compete lawfully. What is he talking about? He's talking about being obedience to the commandments of the gospel. Because the Bible, the New Testament does give us commandments to live by. The character of God is the same. He didn't change from the Old Testament to the New, saying, well, I commanded obedience to the Old Testament. That's not as important in the New. No, it's still important. It's just we're under a different covenant. And the thing that knocks prize fighters out in these 15-round fights is the lack of stamina. And that stamina comes from the training. If you look at what Paul says about the church in Ephesians, he says, I think it's Ephesians, he says, listen, he says that all these ministers of the church, they're there to perfect, the church's purpose is to perfect the saints. You often hear the church is a hospital. Well, yes, in one sense, we receive the sick of, that are sick with sin. But what was Jesus always saying? He never told these sinners that came to him, or that he came to them and preached, and never told them to stay in it, did he? He never told them, well, it's okay. We're all sinners. You're okay. I'm okay. No, he forgave them. He had mercy for them and loved them, but he also told them, go and sin no more. Commanded them to keep themselves unspotted from the world. And oftentimes people use the fact that he ate with sinners to justify the hedonistic lifestyle. Well, look, Jesus ate with sinners. Yeah, to call them to repentance. That's what people forget. And so what Paul says is that the purpose of the church and the elders, the bishops, the deacons, is for the perfecting of the saints. So the church is a training ground to perfect the saints. But what do we have in the churches now? Well, you're all sinners, and, woe is us. We're all just sinners until Christ comes back and we get our glorified bodies. But that's not what the Bible teaches. So what happens is now Christians who are, we're in this 15-round fight. It's called the kingdom, the narrow road to the kingdom. And what's happened is they're training eating junk food. And that junk food is all these churches telling you could be saved in your sin. That's the junk food. And then we wonder why Christians have non-victorious lives. We wonder why there's people that just fall out of the faith. Because why? What's the number one cause of falling away from the faith? Unbelief. What causes unbelief? Sin. Because it's much easier for people to say, well, you know what? All this stuff isn't real anyways. They start critiquing the Bible, the faith. Because why? Because they cannot overcome sin. And you get that from Hebrews. So the faith of Christ should cause us to also overcome, because that's the faith that we have, right? Christ overcame. He had the Garden of Gethsemane experience, and that was the ultimate test. So part of the training for this 15-round prize fight that we're in, or I like in our kingdom experience, our road that we're walking, which the goal is what? Heavenly Canaan, Hebrews 11. So you have to train properly. Part of that is the food you eat. Well, for us spiritually, what spiritual food are we intaking? You know, I'm tired of this kind of non-victorious, defeatist Christianity being preached in the pulpits. And we wonder why the church as a whole is at probably its most weakest point in the history of the church. Yeah, numerically, tons of numbers. But health-wise, stamina-wise, the weakest. Why? They're not training right. And you're going to get hit in this kingdom road walk, this kingdom walk. You're going to get hit just like you're in a 15-round title fight. You're going to get hit no matter how great of a boxer you are. If you last 15 rounds, you're going to be hit several times, even knocked down possibly. Well, those that are trained well get up. They get up, they fight back. Are you fighting back? Are you getting up when you get knocked down? Anyways, make your calling and election sure. That means that demands an active participation by you in your entrance into the new heavens and new earth. Hail Christ, hail victory. Bye.